So I really want to say thank you, Hannah, for taking the time to attend. I know you've not been to ZafigoX, and you may not have heard at all about us, but it is a different way of approaching women's issues through what I call the side door of travel. As those who have been here before will understand, we're talking about travel, yes, but we're also talking about something else, a byproduct that is hopefully inspiring and empowering. And that's why we've decided that instead of making you do an opening speech and preparing and all that, we thought we'd do something different. Because after all, you're a young woman, relative to me, definitely young, who's been handed quite a lot of responsibility. So, at ZafigoX, while we talk about travel and how women go about it and what barriers they may or may not face, we also realize that journeys don't just occur physically, but also in the mind and in the soul. And I read your book, Becoming Hannah. If any of you have ever read it, YB Hannah also has a biography, an autobiography, well written, I must say, from a writer's point of view, called Becoming Hannah. And it's very clear from reading your book that you've had a bit of a journey yourself. So can you tell us a bit about the journey you made from being an ordinary would-be lawyer to now the Deputy Minister of Women, Family and Community Development?
Thank you, Marina. I grew up in Subang Jaya, so it's a very urban place in PJ. And ever since I was young, I wanted to travel to the countryside. And so when I had the opportunity to sign up on a youth exchange program to New Zealand for 6 weeks, I did that at the age of 18. And so I went to New Zealand, stayed in the North Island and the South Island, and then stayed in a caravan for weeks. And I really enjoyed that experience. So when I came back after that trip, I made sure that in my studies, I need to make sure that my father sent me overseas. So look around the cheapest option, and the cheapest option at that time in 1998, when the ringgit was quite low, but thankfully it was quite affordable for me to travel to Tasmania. And so I studied my law degree in Tasmania, 2 years in KL, 2 years in Tasmania. I had a very, very, very exciting time in Tasmania, and when it was time to come home, I applied for PR because I really wanted to escape Malaysia and just be permanently in Tasmania. For me, Tasmania is not as far as New Zealand, but having all the experiences of New Zealand, because the island is quite small and beautiful and close to home. And so I applied for PR, but unfortunately my PR was rejected. And so I had to come back.
Thank God for that.
So I came back and I worked as a lawyer for 3 years, but after doing law for 3 years, I felt I didn't have a lot of time on my hand to do what I'm passionate about, and that's church ministry. And so I quit law and I went into event management so that I can have a more flexi working hours. So my job as an event manager at that time for that 2 years involved around organizing contest management, use 100 ringgit with MasterCard, come and redeem a soft toy in Mid-Valley. So my job was to count all the teddy bears for redemption. Every single Sunday, redemption would be very high, and I'll count all the goodies, and then on Monday, replenish them in all the shopping malls. So it was really a job that I enjoyed simply because I love shopping malls. I love being in a shopping mall. And so even though the job was very tedious, requires me to spend, after 10 p.m., set up of those contest booth, but I really enjoyed that time, 2 years. And then when election came in 2008, I was by then a DAP member, and I was told to be on standby. And then they offered Subang Jaya state seat to me to contest. And Subang Jaya is my hometown, so I'm very passionate about what happens in Subang Jaya. And so I say yes at the age of 29, and it's been 10 years since then. Now I'm already 40. So, life happens very, very quickly. They say when you're having fun, it happens a lot faster. But there's really no job that offers you 100% joy. So even though I enjoy doing what I do now, But there are still bad days, there are still bad moments. But I'm just glad that majority of the time is quite enjoyable. Yeah.
So there you go. You were an event manager, so I hope you're not looking at this event and ticking off. Like that could be better. So okay, I want to get rid of this question very early, simply because it's a standard question. And when let's talk about men. When men succeed in business and politics, or both, sometimes it's both, nobody asks them how they balance their lives, as corporate or political men, with their other roles as husbands and fathers. Women are asked this all the time. I know this. I've been interviewed for God knows how long, and it always comes up. And I don't particularly want to repeat this because it's so standard. But when I read your book, it's quite clear that you can't escape, that we can't escape these multiple roles, right? And you got married, as I understood it, just before 1 month before you stood for your first election, and then had 2 children who are still small, right? During that time. So as you say, life went by really quickly, but not just in your public political life, but also in your personal life. And how did you do that? Is it because you're young and energetic? Because I can't imagine doing that at this age. How did you cope?
I'm a strong believer in destiny, and so my husband's, my marriage to my husband happened 6 months before I was asked to run for elections. So if you have read the book, there's an entire chapter on marriage and love, and on how we never dated, but through a session in church as I was preaching, he was in the crowd, and he felt very strongly that this is going to be my wife, and so he proposed to me, and
you have to read that chapter.
Yeah.
It's
so I took about 10 days to decide. To you, 10 days is a short time, but to me it was a long time, and for him even longer. And so after 10 days, we said yes, and we got married by January 2008, and February it was nomination day. And so for me, having been able to jump into marriage, because I believe in destiny and I believe this is it, jumping into politics was not that difficult already. So a lot of people ask me, how can you just decide to jump into politics? Well, 1 month before, I jumped into marriage. And so that enabled me to do it. And since then, a lot of things have changed. I have grown up, and I now have 2 children. For me, I understand the call to rebuild Malaysia, and that's something I have to do. That's my responsibility. But every time I'm doing this thing called rebuilding, I'm reminded all the time why I'm building this, so that my daughters can have a better future in Malaysia, so that they don't have to fight the things that we fight today. And because of that, it makes sense going out to work. But at the same time, as a mother, a lot of times our hearts are with our children. And so we struggle with our hearts being in 2 places emotionally. When I'm at work, I'm always thinking about, oh, what are my daughters doing at home? But when I'm at home, I'm now constantly looking at my WhatsApp and trying to catch up on all the messages and work. So you can actually end up running around, doing a lot of things, but physically present, but emotionally just absent. And so that's something that my husband had to stop me and a few times and have those tough conversations with me to tell me, you better find the right balance, because your portfolio is women, family, and community development. You don't want to mess up your family, at the same time going out, talking about family and women empowerment. So we are very, very conscious of that. So I do try to make time the best I can, and I hardly travel now, even though a lot of people say, when you become a deputy minister, there'll be so many conferences, there'll be so many things. I'm always looking for ways not to travel so that I can do what I do now and at the same time be present at home. Yeah, so there's a lot of running around.
Just curious, was it ever held against you being young, being female, being newly married, with little children, in the world of politics? it's basically a man's world in many ways. Was it ever held against you?
Thankfully, there are more of us now, more young women and young parents in politics, so nobody really dares to complain about us having to run around. I mean, I have Deputy Minister of Education. Sometimes when we're having lunch, she say, I got to rush off, I got to pick up my kids. So it makes me feel like, okay, I'm not alone. And I have Deputy Minister for Agriculture, Simzazin, telling me, oh, sorry, tonight I cannot go out for dinner because it's my time to look after the kids. So it feels like a normal thing because there are more of us in politics. But yes, people do hold this against us, and sometimes you have to make certain compromise. For example, if I can, I would say no events on Sunday. But sometimes it just doesn't work like that. Some people have no other choice but to hold the event on a Sunday, and then you just, and if they do it only once a year, so if you insist on not turning up, then you actually don't see your constituents for one whole year, and it can happen, and then, you know, after 5 years, they'll vote you out. And so you have to make adjustment all the time, yeah.
So the answer is really to have more women and more young people in politics, right? To change the whole thinking.
Yeah. So it becomes normal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So again, going back to your book, you had, which I meant to bring for you to sign, but I forgot. You've had leadership qualities from young. You were head prefect at school twice, and a leader at church as well. And yet, at the time, because of those very leadership positions, you said, although I don't totally believe this, you said you didn't do too well at school. So something gives, right? When you want to pursue something, something gives. Is that inevitable, that when you get into a leadership position, as speaker before, as deputy minister, that something has to give? And what would that be, and where would you draw the line?
I don't think any one of us can actually do everything that we want to do and excel in them. So something will have to give. For me, definitely is time for myself now. I hardly have time on my own. I try to still hang out in shopping malls, so I fix appointment in shopping malls if I can. So that in between appointments, if you are late, I have 15 minutes to walk around on my own, and that's my me time. And so you have to be creative in finding that me time space for yourself.
Don't people stop you though in public?
It depends,
take photos?
Depends on where you go. If you go to a very busy mall like Sunway Pyramid, because people walk in and out so quickly, they don't notice you. If you go to a quiet mall, then you can be stopped for photographs. Yeah. And
good tip.
So the two things that give, I think, is the me time, and of course, when you have time at home, you usually, as a mother, give your best to your children first, which is a lot of mistake mothers do. So by the end of the night, when your children are asleep and you are exhausted and tired, you have very little time for your husband. And that's when your husband can feel quite neglected. And so for busy women, find time to try to reverse that. Sometimes the husband must have priority and not the children. Otherwise, you know, your husband will feel that you are giving him all the leftover. And you really don't want...
I hope my husband's not in the audience. I can tell he'll be nodding his head.
Yeah. So that's something that I have to learn, how not to, at the end of the day, still reserve the best of me for my spouse. Not easy to do, quite challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, again, it comes back to balance, isn't it? Like, there's so many components of our lives. I wonder if male politicians think that way, you know? Like, I have to reserve some time for my wife. You know, maybe next time we'll have a guy up here and ask him the same questions.
Yeah, maybe next year get a male politician and ask him.
Yeah, and ask him exactly the same questions.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah. So, since this is a women and travel event, I know you said you like to travel, how has travel impacted on you? I know you were, like you said, in New Zealand and Tasmania as a student, and since then have also been in elsewhere, I think as part of your job, and how have any of these travels shaped you as a person or taught you anything about yourself?
I used to enjoy travel a lot when I was single. Not when I was not a mother. But now as a mother, my heart constantly longs for my children. And so instead of thinking of how to expand my trip or extend it so that I can go and see this place and that place, I'm always thinking about which which is the next flight I can catch to go home. And so it has changed ever since I became a mother. But when I was single and young, the first consideration is the place I'm going to has to have 4 seasons because I don't like the hot weather. So I will not choose a place that is similar to Malaysia, that means hot all year round. Because if I want hot all year round, I might as well just stay in Malaysia. So I always make sure I go to a place that is cold, if I can. And then number 2, shopping must be good and affordable.
She's so normal, isn't she?
There's really no point in going to a place where you keep making the conversion and then you cannot afford to buy this, cannot afford to buy that, then you might as well just shop in KL. And so shopping and scenery. One thing I will not do when I travel is I don't like a fixed itinerary. That means when I'm on a holiday, I don't want someone to tell me, this is what time you have to meet at the hotel lobby. We're going to go on a bus, and then I only have half an hour at my favorite place. Now I have to hop on the bus and then wait for other people to come and board the bus. And so I prefer a free and easy kind of travel. So scenery and shopping, 2 things. I never want to go to an educational place. I know I sound very shallow, but I really don't like to go to museums, art galleries. I just feel like I don't want to come on holiday, my free time, and I don't want to end up studying again about world history. So I just want to go to a place where I don't have to think. I can just eat and enjoy and shop. Yeah. So that's my idea of good travel.
I can tell you that it's completely true because last year I was in London actually studying, and Hannah came by for some conference, right? Education or some conference or other, and that's precisely when she had free time. That's all she wanted to do. We had dinner, and then all she wanted to know is, where can I go and find some really cool earrings? So I had to give her some tips of where to go. And I hope you found what you wanted, right? So, well, we have 5 more minutes. I'm sure there are many more things that we can talk about today, but in your job now, which is heavy responsibility, what's it like actually to be 40 and to be almost at the top of government, especially a new government which wants to do things differently? Do you feel that things can happen, things can change, or do you feel like it's kind of draggy, or things are not moving fast enough? I mean, give us your take 1.5 years in.
I think the thing about politics is you really need to learn how to work as a team. So there are good days, there are good seasons where everybody will just embrace the logo that you represent, regardless of what you say or what you do. And so those are the good moments. But there are also times when your party may not be as popular as before, or the logo is no longer as popular. So there's a lot of collateral damage. What another minister says affect you as a person, and you can't scold them publicly. So how do you deal with that as a team? And so I've learned that to ensure that I always hear from the ground, the feedback, and at the same time spend enough time with the young and the older ones to get our perspective right. So I do make time to spend time with the young people in college and university to hear what is their idea of change, and also at the same time spend time with the senior politicians, people like Tan Sri Afrida Aziz, just to hear, okay, what is your experience? What do you think I should be doing? And so that you get a balanced view on approaching a subject matter. Yeah, the mistake a lot of people do is to always just stick to your same circle, same age. So what you want can be so off from what other people want. And so finding that balanced view requires you to move out of your normal circle and just really invest time in people who are different from you, so that you have no choice now. If you're going to represent the federal government, you do not just represent the urban middle class, you represent the rural, the poorer community, and also those who are retired and the young, especially our portfolio from womb to tomb. We have to listen and engage and learn from everybody. Yeah.
And finally, do you have any regrets about the past, 10 years or so since you've been doing all this? And is there anything you would have done differently, do you think?
If there's anything that I would have done differently, would be I should have eaten less when I was pregnant. Simply because when you're a public figure, those photos taken in public do not disappear from Google. And so until today, I see, when I Google my name, I have horrible photos of myself. I balloon so much, and weight gain is something that I struggle even until today. And so I think for a lot of women, we all deal with this. So if there's one thing I regretted in the last 10 years, would be this.
Do you get time to exercise or anything? Do you have a routine that you stick to?
I bought a machine at home. It's still there. At home, I know there's no excuses, but really it's tough. So when I have a little bit time, I just want to rest. The easiest way now is just to try to eat healthy. If I don't have time to exercise, I try to make sure I cut down on the food that I consume. Yeah.
But hard to do, no, in your line, because people always serve food.
Yes,
it's
rude.
Malaysian
if you turn
meetings
up. Yes.
are hazardous.
Yeah. It's rude if you don't eat when people take time to serve you. Yeah.
But well, I hope you look fine to me. So I hope you manage to balance all that.
Thank you.
Hannah Yeoh, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, everybody.
coming. YB Hannah can't stay longer, unfortunately, because she has to rush off. And very sadly, a colleague of hers, Deputy Minister in Prime Minister's Department, passed away this morning. So very sad. So she has to rush off to pay her respects. But thank you so much for making time. Thank you so much for talking to us. And all the best. We hope to see you rise even further. Thank you very much.
Just before you leave, YB Hannah, we would like to share a little token of appreciation with you. Thank you so much.